Fair warning, this one gets a touch violent. I am in no way advocating violence or attempting to glorify violence, just trying to tell my story of an entitled mother who played a stupid game and won several stupid prizes. So backstory. I'm in the Navy and a few years ago was stationed on a ship. As part of my duties, I would occasionally have to stand as an armed guard at the entrance to the piers where the ships were docked. One Saturday evening, I'm standing guard, and for the first few hours, everything is going fine. A few pizza delivery drivers, a few totally not drunk sailors. Yes, it's a stereotype, but it's true. Typical evening. And then my quiet watch came to a screeching halt. The entitled mother came up to the gate, and I asked to see her ID. And the following conversation ensues. For the sake of security, certain details are being left out. The entitled mother gives a very loud huff and pulls out her driver's license. My son is on the ship.
Me. All right, ma'am. Is he coming to get you?
No. Why? I can't let you onto the pier without proper identification or an escort. But I showed you my license. Ma'am, in order to come onto the pier by yourself, you'll need a military ID or a temporary pass. Since you don't have any of those, then you'll need your son to come down from the ship and escort you on board. While I was talking with the entitled mother, another person came up with her military ID in hand, and I attempted to let her through, practically yelling. The entitled mother says, "I was here first, you brat." She didn't use brat, she said a strong word. Me, ma'am, that is uncalled for.
What are you gonna do about it, you jerk?
Again, she didn't use jerk. She used a World War II German soldier analog, starts with an N. I used every ounce of mental strength to not yell at her mom. Step away from the gate. No, I'm gonna see my son. And proceeds to attempt to push past me. I pulled my can of OC spray off my belt, move in front of her, and now forcefully commanding, "Ma'am, this is your last warning. Step away from the gate or you will be sprayed." For those of you who don't know what OC spray is, it's oleoresin capsicum. Think of it as mace and pepper spray's evil cousin, and it hurts a lot. Like 100,000 hypodermic needles full of burning molten salt being drilled into your eyes, and it doesn't stop for hours. The entitled mother makes one more step towards the gate. She says, "Screw you, slur." I spray the entitled mother right in the face, toss the can away, and tackle her to the ground and handcuff her. All the while, she's yelling every obscenity in the book. She would have made a Civil War-era sailor blush, threatening to sue, "I know your boss, I'll get the president to get you fired," which personally, I would have loved to have seen. Yada, yada, yada. Typical Karen threats with no effect. All while this was going on, the other guard who was with me had called for the watch supervisor, and the girl who I was going to let through had called the base police. A few minutes later, 2 squad cars rolled up, one of which was the county sheriff, an ambulance, and the watch supervisor. The medics started treating her OC contamination, and when they cut the cuffs off, they were flex cuffs. She punched 2 of them and wiped OC onto the 3rd. The base cop ran over and cuffed her with real cuffs now. I recount the encounter to the sheriff and the watch supervisor. The other guard and the girl do the same, and the entitled mother was arrested for trespassing on government property twice, failure to follow the instructions of military police, resisting arrest, and assaulting an EMT thrice. The best part was her son's ship pulled into port 2 days later. For anybody who may think I used excessive force with the OC spray, I had 5 reasonable options to stop the entitled mother. Verbal commands. Usually works with about 80% of sane and even slightly drunk or high people. Not going to work on determined or stupid people. MACH take downs. Hand on physical maneuvers and joint holds. Unencumbered would have been the best option, but in 25 plus pounds of gear and having a sidearm on makes these by themselves dangerous. Combined with OC or baton strikes makes these much more effective in gear. OC spray causes near instant reaction in 99% of people, with very rare severe reactions occurring in less than 1 in 50,000. Steel retractable baton. While it would have been effective, the baton was not necessary. Plus, well-placed strikes can easily break bone, and in a worst-case scenario for a body strike. Because a heart attack. 9mm sidearm. At no point during the encounter was the definition for deadly force authorization met, nor did I feel that my life, anybody else's life, or the docked ship's safety was threatened by the entitled mother's actions. Even if the entitled mother had pulled a knife, OC would be more than sufficient to disarm just about anybody. The full effects wear off in about 5 hours by themselves, and about an hour or 2 with medical care. The city I live in has extremely inflated vehicle values compared to the surrounding areas. If you buy the same car from a neighboring state, you can often save $3,000 to $4,000 without really trying. When I buy a new vehicle, which happens every 3-4 years, I always look in the surrounding states to compare pricing. This story happened about 5 years ago. and the malicious compliance is still ongoing to this day. I was shopping for a new car, brand new, and found one that matched my specs about 12 hours away in a neighboring state. It was priced about $5,000 below comps. After looking up flights, there was a one-way direct flight that took me to their local airport for around $175, plus the gas to drive back. I was looking at a total of maybe $275 to save $5,000. Absolutely worth it in this situation. I reached out to the dealership, negotiated a bit, and agreed on a price. I let them know that I would be flying in to pick up the car, and offered to pay in full in advance of the flight. They told me that all they needed was a $1 deposit, and that the car was considered mine. We signed a contract, and I paid the deposit, and then I booked the flight for 3 days from then. First sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the airport, the dealership was supposed to pick me up. This had been arranged in advance. A quick phone call later, and I grabbed an Uber to take me the 20 miles to the dealership with the promise of them covering that cost. No big deal either way. Second sign of things gone awry. When I showed up at the dealership, the salesman I had been speaking with asked me if I wanted to walk the lot with him to look at a few cars. Yes, cars. Plural. Questioning what he meant by that, we walked into the lot to see these cars that he was talking about. Were these some special type of gold inlaid, full self-driving, full self-flying, amaze, mobiles? No, they were not. When I point blank asked to see the car that I was buying, the one with VIN X listed in this signed contract with a deposit on it, I was told it was no longer available. The salesman offered to show me similar cars, which would have been fine were we able to come to similar terms on pricing. But all of these cars outrageously priced. Think $2,000 over manufacturer's suggested retail price instead of $5,000 under manufacturer's suggested retail price. Important note for later, there was never a mention or any paperwork, signage, etc., of any incentives for giving 5-star reviews. Fast forward 2-3 hours. I am now convinced this dealership never had this specific car on the lot, and that this was 100 a bait and switch gone wrong. The dealership was unwilling to sell me a similar vehicle at a similar price to our negotiated one. We were over $5,000 apart, and were unwilling to pay the flight costs for this bait and switch scenario. A heated discussion ensued between myself and the general manager, where he told me to go ahead and leave a bad review, but that I wasn't getting any free money from him. I took an Uber to a nearby hotel and booked a flight back home for the next day. Total cost? Around $750. Cue malicious compliance. This dealership had an average Google rating of right around 4.5 stars and around 400 total reviews. Pretty solid for dealership. That night, while I was sitting in the hotel room, I had some time to burn. I spent a couple of hours creating new email accounts just so that I could leave multiple reviews for this dealership. All said and done, I had left around 21-star reviews over the course of that night, and then sort of stopped caring about the reviews. At this point, my focus shifted to recovering my lost travel expenses. A few days after getting back, I sent the dealership a demand letter for $750, which they promptly ignored. Since we had done the original contract with the deposit in both states, I was allowed to file a small claim suit in my state, which I did. The dealership never showed up to court, and I received a default judgment for $750. I did collect that, by the way. It took a few certified letters, a few phone calls, and about a year. But I did get a check for $750. As you can imagine, I was still not a happy camper. What they had done was wrong on so many levels. All of my friends knew the story of how I was bait and switched, and the fact that I flew to the dealership on a one-way ticket only made it that much worse. They had all left a bad review or two, but nothing more than a normal mad customer. Cue malicious compliance, long term. I don't know how it started or how it ended up lasting as long as it has, but at some point I had some time on my hands and left a bad review for this dealership. Just one. Not two. Not three. One. In doing so, I noticed that all of the reviews I had left right after leaving the dealership were gone, probably taken down for being fake or because I had left so many at the same time and the dealership reported them. I wanted to make sure this dealership wouldn't do this to someone else. So the next day, I checked to make sure that one bad review I'd just left was still there. It was, and since I was thinking about it, I went ahead and created another account and left another 1-star review. Fast forward 2-3 years, it has now become habit. Every time I have a few minutes to spare, I create a new account and leave a 1-star review for this dealership. Their current rating? 1.9 stars with nearly 3,500 total reviews. I am personally responsible for at least half of those reviews. When you open the dealer's website, one of the large banners that flashes across the screen advertises $50 for a 5-star review. Something about showing the review to your salesman to get a $50 Visa gift card. It has been this way since about a year after this bait and switch occurred, right around the time the one-star reviews began to accumulate, assuming I'm responsible for half of their reviews, and the fact that the dealership only has 3,500 total reviews. They have paid $50 per review for at least 1,000 reviews, likely more than that, meaning they have implemented a policy to pay for reviews, have spent $50,000 doing so, and have still seen their average rating drop consistently since telling me to go ahead and leave a bad review. About 10 years ago now, I was working for a small data center in my town. I originally started there as a tech support operator and did call center work helping various small companies over the phone with basic computer issues. I wasn't over the moon about it, but I also didn't hate it. However, when one of our major clients backed out of their contract due to budget cuts on their end, my company scrambled into a reorg and tried to keep as many employees as possible, hoping to win that client back. During that reorg, I got shifted over to physical security. I took over the role of 2 individuals, while they did a lateral move. My new role had me running the daily ins and outs of the data center and its security, while they were supposed to make improvements. Of course, I had never done this type of job before, but I took to it pretty quickly. It also didn't take me long to realize that one of the individuals that I replaced, Ted, wasn't quite up to snuff like he thought he was. Ted's biggest enemy was the cameras. He constantly struggled with them. He couldn't ever figure out why they weren't saving the footage the way he thought that they should be. He would bemoan about how he had a camera set up and working the way he wanted it to, only to have it stop saving the files properly a few weeks later. He also rarely let me help and take a look at the configurations of the cameras because I don't need to know how to adjust them, just how to watch them. One day, though, he was struggling with a camera that a client was paying for. They wanted a camera on their servers to make sure that only their team worked on their servers. I always thought it was a bit of paranoia since each server rack had a lock and key, and even security didn't have spares. But it made the client happy and the company was making money off it, so whatever. Anyways, Ted was panicked because he couldn't get the cameras to save properly and he didn't know what to do. He eventually gave up and put a call into the camera manufacturer, Cisco, to try and get them to assist. In his frustration, he left the camera configuration open and I decided to take a crack at it. I mean, I have a technical background and camera systems aren't really all that different from any other program I have to troubleshoot on the spot. So I wrote down all the original configuration information and made sure I documented any changes I made. Eventually, I figured out why Ted couldn't grasp the camera issue. Ted never understood that all the cameras save all their data to a single server, and the server was full. And looking at just this camera configuration, I could tell why. He had the camera recording and saving all its footage for 24 hours a day in HE. Plus, he wanted this to keep 90 days worth of footage. In case you don't know much about camera or video footage, that's a lot of storage space you'll need. That doesn't include all the other cameras that were probably also set to similar settings. But the software never errored out saying it wouldn't be able to save that much storage. It would just let you make all your changes and then at the bottom of the screen say something similar to estimated archiving max allowance, 2 days, meaning the server only had enough space to save 2 days worth of footage with that configuration. However, Ted must have never seen that or never knew what it meant. Realizing the issue, I proceeded to make the correct changes, setting the camera to record only on movement, turning it down off ad, and increasing the footage priority, meaning it wouldn't be the first to be overwritten if the server ran out of space again. After making the changes, the dialogue said something closer to estimated archiving max allowance, 100 days. I smiled and quickly called Ted up to let him know what the issue was and how I fixed it. However, instead of a grateful Ted I got, "Hey Ted, I fixed the camera issue. See what's going on is that I was cut off." "What camera issue?" "Oh, that client camera that you struggled with earlier. I think you said you couldn't get it to save for 90 days. What? Why did you touch that? You're making us breach the contract, but it's already broken. We are already breaching the contract." No. I have a ticket with Cisco. They will fix the issue. Put it back immediately."
Okay.
No. Just put the camera back to the original setting I had it at. Let the experts figure it out. But I figured it out. Just put it back and stop changing the configs. If I learn you're the reason we're having camera problems, I'll make sure Linda knows about it. Linda was my boss's boss. "Okay, fine." I sighed and hung up, putting the camera back to its broken configuration. Of course, Cisco never called back and Ted forgot about the issue. And now he was plagued with even more camera problems because the rest of the cameras weren't saving their footage either. For the next 2 weeks, whenever Ted walked into the security office and had a problem with a camera, I would try and explain the issue, only to be huffed away and asked to go stand in front of that camera so I can see if it will pick up your motion. In his eyes, he essentially demoted from physical security lead to motion detection officer. Eventually, I gave up, and amongst other various issues I had between him and management, I started to look for a new job. Now, it's my second to last day at work, in about 3 months since that day when I performed my malicious compliance. I have my replacement working at my desk, handling all the tasks that need to be done, and I'm just sitting in a corner reading a book. That's when Ted walks into the security office. His face is red, and he's huffing angrily. He goes to the wall of monitors and pulls up that same camera, and then clicks furiously around on the screen while getting angrier and angrier with each passing click. I decided to see what the issue was, and wouldn't you know it, he's fiddling around in the archive section. That camera isn't saving any footage for more than an hour. I couldn't help but smile. I tried to cover it with my book, but Ted glanced up at the wrong time and started going off.
What are you smiling about?
Nothing. I can see you're busy. Unfortunately, I couldn't help but let out a sneer of pleasure. Ted jumps up and walks directly over to me, then proceeds to try and drill sergeant me. What are you laughing at? Now here's the thing. I've never been in the military, but I have had the drill sergeant routine placed on me 1,000,000 times in my life. I'm not scared by it anymore, plus I'm sitting down, so the effect isn't working properly. Thus the laughter now spills out of me. That's the camera I had fixed for you. But you got all pissy about it and told me Cisco would fix it. Guess you didn't follow up on the ticket. Oh, so glad you think this is funny, but you don't have to go tell the client that we don't have any of their footage they are looking for. Nope, you're right, I don't. I spin around in my chair and then land one more tiny sucker punch. But I mean, if you're too scared to do it, I can. The worst the client can do is request I be fired and whoops, what do you know? I've already done that for them. Ted huffs at me, draws his fists up ever so slightly, and then finally turns away, storming out of the office. The aftermath. The client never cared about the footage. They just let it drop. My replacement for my position, however, wasn't so easily cowed by Ted as I was. Also, my replacement had an in with someone much higher up in the food chain than I did. Ted only lasted another 6 months at the company before someone finally realized that he wasn't up to par. So this happened to me about 4 months ago, and I was telling this to a few of the current company employees that I work for now, and they said I should post the story here. So I came to work one day and got a call 15 minutes into my shift from the entitled site supervisor. He told me that I had received a complaint from one of the employees, an entitled one too, by the way, that I was sleeping on shift. At first I thought to myself, how can I be sleeping if I'm logging in truckers about every 5-8 minutes? I worked as a gate guard for a trucking company terminal. I carefully explained to him that I was not sleeping as I do not get time to sleep or even use the restroom at times. I barely have time to heat up food when the rush comes in. The supervisor told me that I would be receiving a written warning for sleeping and that I needed to sign it for confirmation. This is how the next conversation went. All right, I'm going to be giving you a written warning, and I need you to sign stating that you agreed to these accusations and you'll be let go. I told you that I wasn't sleeping. I am not going to sign or agree to anything that isn't the truth. He cuts me off before I can continue. You will sign it or I will get you fired. All right, get me fired then.
Click, click.
I stayed on my shift to get paid for the few hours left, and I hadn't heard anything from him until 4 days later when the account manager came to my site that I was working at, and she came to me and told me that I was going to be let go from the site and to come to the office tomorrow morning to discuss the harassment charges placed against me. I was livid, so I went to the office the next morning in a business tie and suit, not my normal clothes, because I wanted to look present for my accusations, even though they are a bunch of jerks. I walked into a conference room and sat down. There in the conference room was myself, the supervisor, the entitled employee, the terminal manager, the security account manager. I was apparently accused of harassing the entitled employee and the supervisor. They both went to the terminal manager and account manager saying that I was harassing the supervisor for his nationality and race, and the employee was saying that I was harassing her because of her weight. I let them finish their little rant, and when it was my turn, oh, you wouldn't believe the stuff that I had on them. I had brought my personal laptop with me every night during my shift, and I always saved my recordings with each individual that I had to come face to face with. I saved up, I think, was like 2 paps worth of recordings over 7 months of being at that post. This is how the conversation went. All right, Mr. X, please tell me your side of the story. The account manager asks me. I pulled out my laptop and asked for their emails once I got them. I emailed all of them the link to my cloud. I have sent you a cloud link to the last 7 months of recorded conversation data that I'd been keeping and collecting over time. This was for my protection and the protection of others, as per the security regulations of the site rules and the terminal. Rules. You can't record us without our say. The supervisor says, yeah, you violated the law by recording me. The employee, of course, backed him up. Actually, he has the full right to do so. as the security shack has video and audio being recorded for the safety of my drivers and my employees, the terminal manager told them. The moment the terminal manager said that, you should have seen how their eyes lit up like the 4th of July. The account manager asked for me to leave the room for a moment. I was in the waiting room for at least 2 hours before being asked to come back in. Once I come back in, this is how the conversation followed. I need you to hand over your laptop for further evaluation of this case. The account manager told me, I am not handing over my personal laptop. This is my property, not yours. Well, if you refuse to hand over evidence in this case, I'm sorry to say this, but you are hereby terminated from X security company for violation of security protocols. Please return any items to the front desk within 5 business days, and you'll receive your last check via direct deposit. I walked up and left after about 2 weeks of relaxing and went on a vacation with a friend. I came back to a few emails from the terminal manager at the truck company. I went to the terminal, and as I got out of my car, I saw a different security team from a different company. At first, I didn't think too much of it, as we've done that before when needing extra hands. I sat with the terminal manager in his office, and this is how the conversation went. Hello, Mr. X. I assume you didn't answer the first emails that you were on a vacation, and I can totally respect that. I still had access to your cloud, and went over those videos with a few of my operations managers over these 2 weeks, and I just wanted to say this to you face to face, that the employee has been terminated from the company for numerous violations and theft, and the company's contract was terminated 2 days ago by our corporate office for violations against our contract. Well, if we're all being truthful here, I left you on the cloud to see if you would be able to do something, but I still don't understand why I am here right now. Well, I have an offer for you. I will employ you with us and send you to our privately owned school to get your license, if that is something you would like. You will not have to pay a dime, and I can get you squared away immediately with corporate and our school manager. I, of course, accepted his offer, and the epic revenge was that the account manager and entitled security supervisor were both terminated from that by their corporate office for multiple violations, including the account manager stealing stocks from employees that don't back her story. I am now happy with the trucking company that I am with right now. I am a driver with my own truck, and I run on a nice account making $1,900 weekly before taxes. This one will need a lot of context, so bear with me here. I'm 19 at college. Last year, I started a language education career. My first language is Spanish, and even though I often have mistakes, I can understand and speak English. Then realized I wasn't in the right place, so I dropped out during the first semester. So now I'm studying tether, which is always my true passion. Anyway, during my first semester on language education, we had to do tutoring as a part of our grade. The college I went also had language classes on Saturdays for anyone who wanted to learn a second language. This college only allowed people on their language education's career that had either completed the Saturday's course, that depending on your progress can last up to 8 years, or that may prove they can speak at least 2 languages by a written and oral exam. So I was doing tutorings for English speakers that struggle in their Spanish lessons. One of my tutees was an 18-year-old girl who shone by her absence. She didn't show up, not even once, and never gave me a heads up or explained afterwards why she didn't. I just reported with my teacher that she didn't appear, then reached out to her to reschedule the date of our meeting and called it a day. We were given our tutees or parents' contact to set up the day and hour of our meeting within the college facilities. Then the teacher assigned a classroom for the tutorings and had a full report of all tutorings we had to do. Nothing of interest happened until a few days ago. I received a call from a number I didn't recognize, and as the dumb boy I am, I answered. Me. Hello, who's this? Entitled Dad. Are you my name? Yes, I am. What can I help you with? Working on retail has taken its toll on me. It's your fault that my daughter failed her exams. Excuse me, I don't know what. You tutored my daughter, and she didn't learn anything from you. You sabotaged her and made her fail. I'll report you to your teacher and make you fail too. Sir, I dropped out last year. That's because of your incompetence? Then you have to pay me for wasting my time taking her to your classes. Sir, who's your daughter? I'm not telling you anything. Listen, I need to know her name to give it to my ex-teacher so he can tell you about my tutoring with her. He says, daughter's name. Sir, she didn't show up once to... Don't you dare lying. I took her to tutoring every time you summoned her. I want to talk to your teacher right now. I guess he forgot I told him I dropped out. Wait a moment. I checked my cell phone for my teacher's number and quickly gave him a heads up on what was happening. It's insert number here. Anything else? He hung up on me. A while later, my teacher informed me of how rude the parent was with him and how he complained of me saying I'd been rude to him, and I lied telling him his daughter never did tutorings with me and demanded I had to fail this semester. The teacher explained that I dropped out, then showed him the empty reports of her tutorings, explained to him that her daughter and I never met. He told me that after he sent him the reports, the dad stayed silent for like 20 seconds and then hung up on him. So I guess I won't fail at the college I don't attend. This all took place 5 years ago. At this time, I had just purchased my first house, but told no one about it. I wasn't even dating at this time. It was a huge 3-bedroom townhouse well outside of the nearest city, and it came with 10 acres of land. Somehow word had gotten around that I had just bought a house. I hadn't even moved in at this point. It wasn't long before my entitled aunt found out, and apparently made plans to move in and live there, despite the fact I hadn't even moved in yet. It wasn't long before I got a call from her. The first thing out of her mouth on this call was, not even so much as a hello first. Make sure I have a key when I arrive and move in. I'm like, excuse me, move in? Yes, I'm going to live there, and I'll allow you to live there too, as long as you don't cause issues and get loud. I told her, no, you're not moving into my house. We'll be thrown out if you try. I'm packing my stuff now, she said, as if my word was meaningless, and I'll be there first thing tomorrow and you had better have my key in hand then, and hang up. As a result, I called the cops, who put me in touch with the local sheriff's department. I explained what was going on, so they told me they would have a patrol check the property from time to time and run off anyone that was not supposed to be there, and would arrest those that refused to leave. As it turns out, my entitled aunt tried to go to the property that night and drop some of her stuff off, but was caught by the patrol and told to leave when she said it was her house. They told her no, it wasn't, and the owner does not want anyone on his property, having to threaten to arrest her if she refused to leave. She called my phone number within an hour at about 11 p.m. and started yelling about the sheriff running her off, and I just hung up on her and unplugged my phone for the night. I got up about 4 a.m. that morning and plugged my phone in and found my message box full of repeated messages from her about how dare I not answer my phone and have her run off from her house. Yes, she actually said her house. Later that morning, I called the sheriff again and requested an officer be there at the house in case she came back and arranged a time for my arrival. On my arrival, a sheriff met me at the house. It was less than 30 minutes until my entitled aunt arrived with a carload of her personals and immediately walked up to me and demanded her key. You're not getting a key and you're not living here no matter what you think. She blew up at this point and started shouting how it was her house and she was going to live there, rather, I wanted her to or not. I just smiled, closed the door in front of her, and locked it in front of her. She, of course, tried to grab the keys from me, which I simply put in my pocket and told her, tell that to the sheriff standing behind you. She screamed bullcrap. You're keeping me out of my house. I looked past her and said, see, what did I tell you? At that, a loud sound came from behind her. Ma'am, you have to leave the property or you will be arrested for trespassing. She turned with a sour look on her face, getting ready to unleash another tirade on whoever was behind her, and instead made a strangled sound and her face went white as a sheet. Ma'am, this man does not want you on his property. As of now, you are considered trespassing and will be arrested if you refuse to leave and cease harassing this gentleman. Before you go, Auntie, she hates when I call her that. Just because you want something does not mean you're going to get it, such as my new house. If I ever see you on my property again without my permission, I will have you arrested and have your car towed at your expense. If looks could kill, I'd be dead several times over from the glare she was giving me. She then left, giving me the bird on her way to the car, prompting a sharp rebuke from the sheriff. To this day, she has been going around telling anyone that will listen about how I robbed her of her new house and how she's going to get her house back someday. That's going to be a problem for her. Since then, I have improved the property and sold it for a tidy profit to a really nice but takes no crap couple and bought a new property with more acreage, about 25 more acres, and no one is telling her I moved. She did try sneaking back onto the property about 3 months after I sold it, and the couple's husband nearly fought with her because she came at around midnight, intending on trying to sneak in through an open window or something. This time she did spend about 30 days in jail, 100 hours community service, and 3 years probation plus fees, and court costs for trespassing on private property and attempting to enter a private residence without permission. Don't remember what the actual charge was. Her entitlement knew no bounds, but ultimately a necessary lesson after learning that she was not getting her way with me. From what I'm told, she's calmed down some but still acts entitled and is actively trying to find where I live,